Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 217 of Retro Power Uncut. And I don't have a coffee mug, but there we go. I'm feeling reasonably awake today, so don't need my Roundstone coffee today. We're going to start talking about the Aston Martin project, which is currently just sat on the lift behind me with its tipping over frame welded to it. Nothing's changed on that bit, so nothing to update there. Things are going on though, mostly with George upstairs, and I'm going to let Cal and George take you through that bit. But there is some progress going on the metal front as well, but not here. It is with the company that are doing some work for us in terms of the sheet metal on this project, which is ASR in Irchester in Northamptonshire. And Sean at ASR is making us the new front slam panel, which Jamie will drop some pictures of that in now, but he's doing the jig chasing work on that at the moment and wheeling up and chasing in the various sections involved in doing that on their jig. And that looks to be coming along very nicely. Claire at ASR sent me some photos yesterday of the progress on that, and it's looking really, really good. So thank you to ASR. Hopefully first thing in the new year, I should imagine, we'll get that, and they'll probably have it done for Christmas, but we should have that, and then there's a few other bits we need from ASR as well. So you'll hear of them mentioned a few times on this project, because the various aluminium bits we're getting from them, because they have done quite a lot of this Aston Martin work. So anything you need in terms of Aston V8 or Aston 4-headlight DBS, and in terms pretty much all old Newport Pagnell era Aston Martin restoration stuff, ASR at Irchester, very, very good, very easy to deal with, nice folks, know what they're doing, so very recommended. Moving on from that then, because as I say, I'll let Cal and George pick up the meat of the work on this one. We'll move on to Project Wasabi, and I'm going to walk round to the back. This might be a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to come round to where I can actually point at things on it. So I'll let Jamie have a really hard life on this. Can you get back far enough there, or is that okay? Right. Bobby has been working on the boot floor, which is in, as you can see. He's just been, literally now, just plug welding this. He's got a few little chasing bits to tidy up around there, but this has been the meat of his work for around about most of the last week, basically. And it's quite a big job, because what you can't see from here is all the work underneath, and a lot of the detail work that makes this a really, really neat piece of fabrication. But Jamie will have a reasonable amount of footage from this. Underneath here there is a large X, a fabricated top hat section that joins in the middle in a sort of star shape, where the four legs of the X come together, all three-dimensional, and then it ties into the rails at the ends and sockets over the chassis rails at the ends, so it laps over those and has a flange joint at all four ends of that X that reinforces this section. It's all fabricated in 18 gauge, 1.2mm thick steel, patterned up in cardboard first, and then shaped up. This pan that you can see here in front of me, that's all shaped in one piece. So this return flange on the sides is all shaped in one piece. It has one joint in it, each side at the back, where Bobby's put a split in that in two places at the back, just to facilitate putting this return on. But he was keen to shape. He could weld that return edge on. He was keen to do it as one piece, so it would be like a manufacturer's pressing, which makes it a little bit harder to make, but pretty satisfying end result once it's all done. So he's put that return flange all the way around the outside, folded the sides on, hence having the split there, so we can just put the sides on with the press brake, and then all of the curved section at the front has then been put on by putting that through the bead roller, through the Jenny. So we put that through to put the initial tip on, to put the initial crease in, and then the edges have been then folded up using hammer and dolly, which then gives us quite a large, on these two shoulder points here and here, quite a large amount of shrink required. As that material comes up, it puts puckers, it basically gains folds because there's too much material as it comes up, and that needs getting rid of. So that was done partially on the big pneumatic shrinker. It was done to crunch that material down, to get that material to thicken into itself and disappear. And also partly using a soft hammer and a round dolly, which I believe was just a very heavy lump of very thick wall tube that we have lying around, a sort of like an 1.5 inch thickness wall tube. And then using a heavy nylon hammer, an aluminium hammer. In fact, I think he's used one of Matt's aluminium hammers. You need a hammer that's got a soft face, soft enough to grip onto the surface of the material as you go. And that's one of the keys to that job, is if you using a hard dolly piece of steel, basically to shake the part onto. If you use a steel hammer on the other side as you try and get rid of those creases, you'll spread the material just at the same time as you're trying to flatten those creases out, and that will cause you to basically fight against yourself all the time. Whereas if you're using a soft hammer to do that, it grips the material and stops it from spreading out as you do it, and causes it to collapse onto itself and thicken. So there's a lot of hammer technique involved in doing shrinks on corners like that. And once they get too tight for it to be able to go in the shrinker, it has to just be done with a hammer and dolly. But very successful, all come up very nicely. And as I say, Bobby's then folded up the individual sections of this cross for underneath, fabricated the centre, which is, as you might imagine, a thing to make the middle of this cross, which was a flat plate, and then 4 infill sections, which were all folded and then shaped on the shrinker to put the curves onto them. And then they were all outside corner TIG welded onto that, onto the centre plate, and all the welds dressed back. The whole of that got into a flat condition, which is quite a bit of a ball ache, being blunt. It's quite tricky to get all that to sit flat. It's got all that to sit flat. I think that stress had Bobby a little bit stressed yesterday getting that to that position, but once he got it to that position, he's then spot welded all that into the main tray, got all that again set flat, trimmed up, cleaned up, and then he's literally just got that welded into the car today. So good progress. Back end's looking pretty close to done. So I think that pretty much rounds up all of the main sheet metal and structural fabrication on the back end of the Saab. There's a few detail bits. I'm sure Bobby will know a whole host of further bits that he needs to do. But certainly, as far as I'm aware at the moment, that rounds up the major part of that. And I think the next move will be moving on to the sill and door structure area and getting through that. But I think at that point, we'll move on to the E-Type. Jamie's going to go that side, and I'm going to go this side. Just to confuse and bewilder. So yeah, on the E-Type, Matthew has been working on the rear end. Now, obviously the car is much lower down now. It's been removed from the jig because Matt was struggling a little bit with the height. He's basically having to ascend a set of steps every time he needed to get up to do any work on the boot aperture. But the part he's working on now is making the boot lid skin and boot lid frame fit the actual body. Now there's a little bit of toing and froing in terms of the boot lid skin, in that the boot lid skin that the car was trialled with has actually had to be used, that was supplied, I understood it to be the one that was going to be used finally on the car. As it happened, it can't be, so we've had to use a different one where the fit is actually slightly different. So we've got to make some adjustments on that, and we, in any case, have had to make some adjustments on the frame because the frame had been damaged. The previous accident damage on the back of the original car had actually damaged the frame. So Matt's been doing some rework on the boot lid frame to get the accident damage out and getting it all trimmed up and tidy for the aperture. And then he's been using that to work out and mark out the tweaking that needed doing on the skin, which by the looks of things here, I've been out of the room for a little while, but by the looks of what's going on here, he's been refining this rear edge on the, yes, it is the rear edge. I'm just checking I wasn't saying the wrong thing there. Yeah, he's been refining the rear edge, looking at what's going on here. Matt's not here at the minute, but looking at this, he's been re-edging this rear frame, moving the edge forward slightly on that and shortening the boot lid a little bit. So still the better way to go than completely making a new skin, so still makes sense doing it that way. But yeah, it needs a bit of re-edging and shortening to make it fit. So that's what Matthew's been working on there. As I say, he's just been finalising other work around the boot aperture as well this week, just getting lots of things finalised, and also some work on the front end of the car, various bits of weld dressing, various bits of other work that needed doing before we dropped it off its fixtures. So there was bits of welding to finish in various areas where things hadn't quite been finished off, and quite a lot of weld dressing that was easier to get at when the car was higher up as well, that he's now got out of the way. But he's pretty much now just on track with getting the boot lid to fit, getting all that finalised, getting it to the point where it's just lead work to get that done. And then I think he's going to move on to the A-panel areas and getting those in the same position with the doors as well, making sure that's all ready and just the lead work short of being done. And then the other area that Matt's been working on is getting I don't know what you call these panels, but the fillet panels behind the door that sit at the top of the quarter quarter panels, getting those installed. So he's got this side installed. He's about to start installing that side as well once he's got this boot lid work out of the way with. He'll be working on that side as well. This one's on, basically ready to the point where it can be leaded. That one's just awaiting that stage. So yeah, good progress on the back of the E-Type. Everything's moving forward nicely on that. Moving on from that, onto XJC. Stu's been working on a variety of parts on this, one of which is the air intake for the HVAC fan. You may recall we were revising that on this car, and that Luke had done a sort of a Mark 1 version of that. Now that's needed a couple of revisions because the clearance was too tight on the under dash area, so he has done a revision to that, which is going to be 3D printed and trialled. And then Stu has been working on the PDU mountings, which he's done a lovely little drop-down tray. He's fabricated a tray which sits under the main HVAC unit, which is under the dash down here. If you refer to previous weeks. Stu's done a hinged tray now, which screws up under the dash. You just undo a little thumb screw, drop that down, and that has the two. We're using twin 16-channel ECU master PDUs in the car, and they both sit on a 3mm thick aluminium tray that folds down, acts as a bit of a heat sink for them because because they're semiconductors, they need a little bit of a heat sink, but that sits under there, acts as a heat sink, and also acts as a handy mounting tray that's easy to swing down for access to the wiring. So that all works really well. And then Stu has also been working on a couple of other things. He's got the bonnet on, which we needed to do to check the clearance between Luke's 3D printed air intake elbow that fits on top of the filter housing and the underside of the bonnet, but also between the driving light, which Stu has very handily for me put back in here, the driving light or the auxiliary light bowl, which sits in the bonnet there, and the clearance between that and the air intake trumpet on the filter housing, just making sure that it's not going to impede the airflow too much into that, which it doesn't. So that's good news. So Stu's a happy man there. That's all worked out quite well. And then the other bit that Stu's been working on was the tail end of last week. We saw him working on the boot lid, getting the boot lock section let into the back of the boot lid, which I believe is all done now, isn't it? Stu's just out of shot next to me here, so I haven't actually looked at that, but Stu's got the that boot lock recess done now and all TIG welded into the back of the boot lid and looking really rather nice. So that's done. And then also looking at the fuel fillers, which we've still got to resolve yet. There's a little bit of engineering involved there because we're working in quite a tight space, but we're fitting Aston style fuel fillers on the back of this, similar to the originals but not the same as the originals, and to get them in the space that we've got to do a bit of engineering and a bit of machining and machine a part to allow them to fit. So we'll come on to that when we're a bit further down the line, but Stu was doing the investigatory work to enable that to take place, which we had to start looking into. I think at that point, that's pretty much where we're at on
battery.
Oh yes, I'm being reminded, yes, Jamie's just reminded me wisely, the battery tray. Stu's also fabricated the battery mount. We're actually putting the battery, we're keeping the fuel tanks where they originally go on this, in the quarter panels, because it's quite a neat setup, the fuel tanks on these originally, and we're leaving them where they are. They're neat apart from in the case of rear corner impact, which does puncture your tank. It's one of those things, most rear impacts on a car puncture the fuel tank. Better it's there than under your seat or somewhere inside the car from that point of view. You could argue they're less likely to be punctured there, argue it either way. That's where they are, that's where we're leaving them. But it leaves the space above the axle free. That's a good place to put a big lump of weight. We haven't got room for the battery anywhere else really. It has to go in the boot somewhere. So we're putting that above the axle. Seems a nice place to put it. We can put a trim panel around it, keep it out of the way, keep it all looking neat. So Stu's made the tray for that and got that all mounted. That's quite a nice little folded, made out of 2mm thick steel, cold rolled mild. The ends are folded and swaged. He's made a little chasing tool to put the swages in for the battery retaining lip on the side, and then he's done some punched and swaged holes in the bottom of that and swaged the mounting holes and got all that very, very neat so it all bolts in place above the axle. And I think now that does pretty much tie us up with the end of where we're at in terms of metalwork, but I'll let Mark talk you through what has been occurring in the body shop.
All right, I'm back. I've had man flu, that's it. Probably called it off Nat. He always says, oh, it ain't me, but you know who spreads it. All right, So there hasn't been much happen because obviously Gaz had a long weekend. Steve is on a cruise somewhere around the Canary Islands. So there hasn't been much. I've been off for like 4 days or something. So like, we've been back now, started blocking this, blocking it 320, 400, getting these like lines real laser straight all the way down the car. We'll get the doors back on just to make sure it's all right. And then hopefully after Christmas, I'll bang a sealer coat on it. That like be wet and wet epoxy or primer. We ain't decided yet. Just to make sure there's no flatting marks. And then yeah, you'll hopefully see the colour within 2 weeks after we get back after Christmas. Cos is almost wet flatted now. Obviously I've not been doing that because I've been ill. So hopefully we get that polished up after Christmas, get that back to the customer. Wish we could have got it back before Christmas, but can't help these things with all these festive illnesses. So remember, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a nice Christmas. I'll see you next year.
So thank you very much for that, Mark. And at that point, we're going to hand over to Cal because there's lots going on in the assembly shop, tons going on in the CAD shop, and lots going on at the den. So hand over to Cal and let him take you through all that lot.
Thank you very much, Nat. And you're going to join me in the engine build room, which we don't see anywhere near enough of. But I thought it was looking really awesome this week. Obviously, we were drooling over this engine last week. That's the Cosworth GAA that's going in the Reliance Scimitar. How many people have said that? Well, actually, one other person, I suppose, Bev Fox with the Blue Thunder, is it called? But yeah, nonetheless, I'm so excited about that project. And then actually, I'm going to randomly try and identify some of these blocks. This was not part of the plan whatsoever. But I'm guessing that's a Vauxhall C20XE. This, I'm guessing, is a 4Age. Is that Adams 4Age? Who knows? What I do know is that is the Honda B18, which is destined for the second Allegro. So James is just about to start the build-up of that engine. That's just been away, basically having the new liners in it and being bored to spec, and is ready to start the assembly process. And then, speaking of the assembly process on engines, we have got on to the AJ16 build for Project Churchill, which was somewhat delayed by the trauma of trying to find some of the bearings for it, which Nat might have explained previously. But we ended up getting the big end bearings from Aston Martin, of all things, because Jaguar don't have any stock, but they used the same engine, essentially, in the Aston DB7, and Aston Martin do have stock. So we had on the main bearings what appear to be the last remaining set of AJ16 main bearings in stock just about anywhere in the UK, and then the rod bearings we used Aston DB7 bearings. So there you go, top tip, Aston bearings in a Jag engine. So that probably covers everything in here, and I'm going to do a cut in this uncut and cut to the Allegro. As if by magic, I'm here with the Allegro. General assembly work, I would say, is the order of the day, but there's a few bits I'm going to dwell on. We've finished off the power steering plumbing on this, and then we've been on with the water plumbing. So Honda, throughout this whole process, have actually been remarkably good in terms of their parts availability. So obviously, bearing in mind this is DC2 Integra Type R floor pan and basically all the mechanicals, we've found them to be exceptionally good, and there's a great online parts catalogue on their website, but there's just the odd bit they don't have. So on this one, we've got new Honda radiator hoses. We've even used the OEM Honda clips for them. We've got the water hoses that go from the block to the oil cooler. But the ones they didn't have were the ones to the heater. So we've changed them out. We've used the original Honda water valves for the heater. We've tested those, cleaned them up. They're good. They're good to go. That was a part that wasn't available, but we're happy that these are good to use anyway. And then we've adapted the water outlet on the back of the head, which used to just be a push-on barbed fitting. Put a threaded fitting onto it, and then that's allowed us to do a nice neat 90 by using a 90-degree threaded to push fit adapter. And then we've done a really long leg 90, and it's actually worth mentioning these. These are a Gates hose. I can't remember where we get them from. They're possibly available on Car Builder Solutions, but it's a really, really long-legged 90-degree hose. And the number of times we've been able to do a really neat job of plumbing something with one of these by just cutting the long leg to the right length, rather than having to have a short 90 and then a straight joiner and a straight piece after that. So good tip, that one. So that's what's doing the long reach from the head down to the water valve. Then it'll just be a really short 90 onto the heater matrix and a straight pipe from the other side of the heater matrix back to the block. So that's all good. We've received back from anodizing the little adapters that we're using on the inlet manifold to do the vacuum takeoff for the servo. So they're just on the counter in reception actually. We should have dwelled on those earlier, but we can show that in the B-roll. What else have we been on with? The steering column switches. So this obviously has Honda Integra steering column in it. I say obviously, like an Allegro would always have that. But on the Integra, they have a rear window wiper, and we don't have a rear window with a wiper on these. However, the Civic of the same generation shares a lot of things. It shares most of the floor pan actually, but it also shares the same fundamental steering column, shares the same fundamental switch pack on the column, and the Coupe, I think it is, doesn't have a rear wiper. So there are some available column switch packs that just have a front windscreen wiper only wiper stalk on them. So we've basically tracked down 2 Civic Coupe switch packs, swap the wiper switches over so that the wiper is just the front wiper switch. And then also Anthony this week's been stripping those down, completely pulled the switches apart, cleaned all the contacts, re-greased all the contacts. And actually Alex has been doing the same thing on the ignition barrels, because we're using the Integra ignition barrels, stripping the switches apart, checking the continuity, checking all the contacts are good, re-greasing them. And actually, while I'm talking about Alex, he's making great progress on the biggest of the wiring looms, which is the main PDM bulkhead loom. It goes to all the switch gear, the instruments, the column switches I was just talking about. So he's got, I think, all the wires in place now up there. The PDM connectors on the end of them, so he's going to be moving on now to basically starting to test fit that in the car, then start to sheathe everything up, then start to do the terminations. So it'll be moving forward, but nice just to have all the wires in situ, because that's a fairly bulky wiring harness, that one. So that's that. We've talking about electrical stuff. We've mounted the little mounts down here for the flyback diodes. They're necessary. We're doing PWM control of the cooling fans on this, so the PDM will be able to vary the speed of the cooling fans, and those flyback diodes are a very good idea in terms of avoiding damage to the PDM itself by getting backfeeding between the pulses of the fan control. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're looking pretty good on that. Also, what I was going to talk about, Interceptor. So if we perhaps just swap places, I don't know why I insist on being able to point to the things, but it's a good visual reference. I know full well that Jamie can just stick B-roll over the top. But with the Interceptor now approaching paint, we are looking forward to getting the final build going, and obviously starting to get all the surface finishing processes done on the parts that we used during all the mock-up build, or the dry build as I like to call it. So Anthony's been doing things like splitting the ball joints and bushes out of the lower arms, which you can see down there. He's going to split the bushes out of the rear trailing arms. We've got the front hubs up here. A job that's outstanding on these is that Bobby did a mock-up steering arm when he was working through the geometry, trying to correct all of the bump steer, get the acumen right. He's basically done an adjustable steering arm just as a fabricated item, so he could move it and adjust it easily to get everything right. That's then been set in the correct position, so we can now scan that, take measurements from that, and model a steering arm that will be machined to replace that. And once we've done all that, they can be stripped apart as well, and we can get the surface finishing done on those, ready for those to go on the car. So we're basically just going through the motions of starting to get components ready, surface finished, and then they'll be up on the shelf ready, so when we're on with the build, they're kind of, everything's ready to go and simply bolted on, which is never quite as simple as that, but that's the theory. Right, what else? So CAD Den is probably the next one. So George is on with Aston DBS chassis work, and I'll hand over to him to tell you about what he's been doing.
Okay, hello, thank you, Luke. So this week I've been working on primarily the chassis for the Aston. First of all, I'll get Jamie to put some B-roll over this, but I'll talk it to my screen as always. So we started with, I think Nat said a couple of times, a load of GM data. So a system called, I'm going to forget the name of it now, SEMA Workshop, I think it's called. Effectively, if you sign up for it, you can get all GM assets, so CAD assets. So we have now got a selection of GM parts which we're planning to use on the Aston. I believe this is a Camaro diff, and then it's C7 Corvette suspension arms, knuckles, brakes, all that kind of thing. So that's kind of given us our start point for the chassis. So I've spent this week and last week figuring out all the connecting bits effectively, which is this. It's getting pretty close to kind of where we're fairly happy with it. I still need to go for it, have a good review with Nat and make sure he's happy with kind of the structure and the strength and everything. If anything, it's slightly overkill in terms of strength, but I'd rather be on the side of overkill than underkill. So yeah, it's just using simple structures to kind of create all the strength and mounting points we need, while also kind of not having it just built like an absolute tank. So yeah, this is what we've currently ended up with. Still a little bit of work to be done and checking, and then it's going to be a case of getting the actual car body scanned. We'll get that into this file and then overlay them both, then do the specific body mounts and all that kind of thing. But that probably won't be till the new year. And then aside from that, I've been doing other little bits and bobs jobs, which I won't go into because they are boring and not really worth talking about. So yeah, thank you, and handing back to Cal.
Thank you very much, George. And actually, I'm going to go straight back to the CAD then. Should have introduced them together and see what Luke's been up to.
Hi guys, welcome back to another week at the CAD Grotto. It's been a week of duplicates and small jobs. So I started off this week doing a quick concept for the XJC mirrors. We had the client in last week, had a really good conversation with him. The first time I'd met him, really cool guy, really good client in the fact that he knows what he wants. He's got a very good idea of what he wants, but he's also really open to cool ideas. So I think last week I left you guys with the XJC boot lock, which Stu's done a great job of incorporating into the boot. Really excited to see that in its final form. And then after doing that and sending off the mirror concepts to him, which we're still waiting to hear back on whether he likes them or not, I then did another variation of the boot lock with some sort of badging, which again, he might like, he might not like, but we shall see. And then after that, I scanned the boot again, because since I last scanned it, all the holes were welded, and Stu cut 2 new holes to house the boot lights. So I rescanned that, rescanned the back of the boot, and I've made the little housing for the boot lights, so Stu can literally just put them in, bolt them into the housings, and that's a really easy way of fitting it. And I say it's a week of duplicates, because straight after doing that, I then moved on to the E-Type mirrors. So I think 2 weeks ago now, we sent off the renders for the rear lights on the E-Type. Client was really happy with them. We need to do a 3D print on that to check the fit on the car, so we can kind of see it in person, because not always does everything on the computer look great in real life, so we're going to get that done pretty soon. And then the next thing to tackle was the mirrors, because the rear light is a big chrome strip, and then the logical choice now is to figure out the rest of the chrome on the car. So I started off with sending over a few different options, because we've done quite a drastic redesign on this car, and the original part's not going to work. It's not going to look good. I don't think it really looked that good to begin with. And if you know what I'm talking about, it's the chrome strip that runs along the top section of the door on a standard Series 3 E-Type. So we've done a redesign of that, sort of keeping it along the same lines as the original, but a lot nicer looking. It flows into the mirror. The mirror's got a really cool base on it, which allows for the swivel of the mirror, and it's just a lot nicer looking package. So after a bit of to and fro on where that line should run, and the overall design of the mirror, we've landed on something pretty cool, and I'm really excited to see that kind of get made into a feasible thing. And then, once again, another duplicate after doing the E-Type taillights. I've just scanned the XJC taillights, which I've just got to remake the rear of the housing. We've done some changes towards what chrome strips are going on the back. So I'm going to remake those to fit the original lenses, but look a little bit nicer and kind of serve the function that we need it to serve with modern bulbs.
Thank you, Luke. And I'm actually going to now hand jointly to Nick and Richard to tell you about what's been going on down in the den.
Hello and welcome to the den. So quick one this week. You will have seen last week that we were putting the engine back in the Mustang. So this is a retro power car. It's finished a while ago. The crate engine that came separately was a bit leaky, that Cal was talking about that last week. So that's been kind of partially stripped and reassembled now, all back in the car, everything's up and running, all the levels are good. I've given it a good road test yesterday just to make sure everything's good, so we're happy with that. And I just want to give it another quick road test just as a sanity check, so you can come along with us and see how it is. So this Mustang, just listen to this, I'm going to pass this bicycle. Oh, that's naughty. And I think this is such a stark contrast to the BMW from last week or the week before, which was such a revvy, small, little, nimble thing, and this is a much completely different thing for cruising. I mean, people race these, and I appreciate that will be a completely different build, different setup, everything. But what a thing to cruise in! It's got such presence on the road. It feels enormous, and I think that's probably partly because it's left-hand drive. So typically we're used to driving right-hand drive, but feels massive. The noise is just awesome. Lazy gearbox, loads of torque, loads of noise. It's a shame it's December and the weather's rubbish, because to have the windows down, go for a cruise, absolutely awesome. Love it, absolutely love it.
How's it, everybody? Good to see you. So let me touch on these. The Ford Capri door cards, the front ones are also now done. They came out really nice. So a couple of last things, we're still waiting for the billet bits, but like I showed in a previous video, I've increased the stitch length, then I'm missing all the stitches, so I can just go straight through that seam. We could just bolt them on, no problem. This I'll just put there. I think Jamie's got some nice shots of that. I'll just put that there just to have a look. So we've put it together. When the customer comes and collects the doors to go back to the car, we'll then decide he'll then decide what he's going to do with these top cappings and this little bit here that also matches up with the top of the footwell kick panel. So whether we're going to trim that or make it body color or chrome, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. In the meantime, they're really nice. Can't wait for the customer to come and see them, you know, in hand, because you send him a photo and the photo never does it justice. So I think when he sees them in the flesh, he'll be really excited. So chuffed that that's all done. I think on that project we just got the center console left, and then little bits and bobs that we'll do closer to when the car is closer to a final completion. But if you come over here, I'll show you. I think last week I said there'll be some stuff in the car, and there is some stuff in the car. The back seats of the W124 Merc is in the seats, but here's the 2 front seats. They're coming along nicely. Jamie, you might need to just get, I've done a foundation board on this seat now. That one's pretty much complete, ready to go in. This one, I've got the foundation board, which is this thing, yeah, that just goes at the back. On there, so we won't be putting these in because we're waiting for some on the center console. We're waiting for some billet bits to be coated and stuff. So it looks like that's only going to be in the new year. But we're on our second last day today, so we'll do that first thing in the new year. So I'm going to leave these out because it'll just be so much easier to fit the center console and all that back in, and then the seats last. No problem. In the meantime, I'm just going to finish this. Some of you might have noticed, if you look at that one, we've decided to remove the map pocket. It's a map, I'll show you the old one. So that's why I'm just using a bit of body filler that Mark gave me a while back. Oh, sorry, let me not damage that mic. That used to be on there. But the problem is these were high frequency welded on, so it's got these little plastic pins in there, holes there, goes on, and then, you know, maybe they had a jig where they put it in, it's a one time, or they just had a handheld one form. And the only way to get that off, to chisel it off or to sand it off. Problem is, it's such a flimsy little pin that's left, and the only way you can reattach this is with a short stubby self-tapper with maybe a little bit of glue. And I've seen it in the past where we've done that, put new leather there, put that there, self-tapper it on, and then it only takes 1 bottle of water or something to go in there, and then it comes out. Then that's it. Then the whole thing needs to come out, and it's just struggling with. So we opted for deleting that because we got maps on our phones, right? And just a neat, nice, tidy, clean seat without little flobby bits. And if I swing this around, I think that came out really class. So nothing wrong with that. Very clean, smooth. So chuffed with that, happy with that decision. We consulted the customer over it, gave them the recommendations, and we opted for it. So it looks absolutely stunning. So next year, can't wait to put that in. What else can I show you before we go on a little bit of a Christmas break? Remember what I said, if you see bright colors, it means testing bits. So this is for the Allegro projects. That is the center part of the dash. So you're looking at that. There's I think the radio goes in there, and then air conditioning unit in here maybe. I might be wrong. But we did a test piece, just a section of it, because we need to work out, you can see I started drawing the lines on there. We need to work out where we want the grooves, so the guys can put the grooves in before we do the final product, and also where the seams must go. So first where the seams must go, then we know where the grooves and what type of groove, because we do a different groove for just a folded seam, and a different groove for a seam that's not folded, it needs to be tucked away, and then a different groove for a seam that's got some double needle stitching on it effectively. So, you know, it's just the dimensions of the groove and which way the seam is turned or flicked or tucked in that makes that. So I'm still here on Monday, so I'll probably be playing around with this. So a nice little last day on the job before you break for Christmas job. So, but you'll see this, the result of that next year. Other than that, it has been an absolutely great year. When did I join? April? I think I started 1st of April. So yeah, that was great. April the 1st, yeah, so call me fool. May I wish everybody a merry, a happy, a lekker, whatever you want to call it, Christmas. Enjoy your family and your friends, and may 2025 just be a smashing year for all of us. See you next year.
Thank you guys. I would normally now end by saying go and buy merch in time for Christmas, but that time has gone. So I suppose what's left for me to do is wish you all a Merry Christmas, and we shall see you after Christmas for many, many more videos about what we've been doing in the workshop. Cheers guys.